Okay, that can be further away.
In progress.
Right, thank you. Graham is recording.
And I even got the prompts as well.
Now
It's being recorded, and this is continue or leave meeting. Continue.
I am going to pin. Right, so spotlight me and go hide the participant list. And I'll hide the chat window. So if you've got the chat window open, Shane,
yeah.
If you can just alert me if anybody asks any questions, I've got it closed to make it easier to see things. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my screen and hop over to Safari and then hide that. Right, okay, so now, the new operating systems, the one problem with having preview versions of them is that you're not allowed to show them to anybody. I can't actually run a live demo of the pre-release operating systems because that's against the terms of the developer license agreement. You are allowed to talk about what you've seen when you're running them and show screenshots and things like that. So there's a fair amount of online demos which are perfectly okay. But I think the easiest option, which is what I've done in previous years, is if we just have a quick look through Apple's website at some of the main features. And if anybody has any questions, if I can see the participants list somewhere, that's the trick. Or if Shane can let me know there's somebody asking questions, because I can't see that at the moment. Then I'll basically just run through this quickly and have a look for any areas of interest, and we'll just stop and talk about things that people would like to discuss more. So I don't want to spend, I'll probably only spend about half an hour on features, and then we'll just talk about compatibility questions if there's anything else which I hadn't covered already in my article, or people want to clarify anything. Just as a general overview, it is quite noticeable this year that the new operating systems, Apple has released the bulk of the new features are the same and available on all the platforms at the same time. So it was quite funny when I was writing my summary, I wrote the Mac OS and the iPad OS summaries. I got to the iOS summary and I thought, hang on, there's no features left. I'd already described all of them because nearly everything that's on iOS is available on either the iPad or the Mac or both. So Apple's keynote was quite clever because they sort of did one operating system at a time, introducing a few features. And then when they did the next one, they said, oh, and it's also got this stuff, and demonstrated it's being integrated with all the other operating systems. So that was quite clever. In terms of the feel of these things, macOS Monterey feels like a refinement of Big Sur. So it's basically no major showstopper changes to the user interface, whereas Big Sur was a monstrous change compared to everything earlier. It's sort of refinement and minor features, sort of tweaks all over the place, and a few extra nice to have things. iOS is similar. iOS 15 is like a improved iOS 14. iPad OS has got a few more extra features because it's caught up on some stuff. Main obvious ones being the widgets on the home screen and the app library, which were already in iOS last year, but not in iPad OS. So they've caught up with those features. And it's also got some improvements to its multitasking. Those are the most obvious changes. Otherwise, it also is more or less a refinement of iPad OS 14. So if we just have a look through Monterey first, because that's the one that most people are going to encounter if they're running it on their Mac at some point. So the standard screenshot of the whole thing, can I make that a bit bigger if I go to full screen mode? It's a bit better. So the standard screenshot they're showing there has an example of the group view in FaceTime, where it's actually got a grid of icons. What appears to have happened with FaceTime is that Apple have looked at Zoom and copied the easiest to copy features. So it has a grid of icons for all the people who are in your group meetings. You have the ability to schedule a meeting in your calendar, and you can share a link to a meeting that other people can join. Plus it has possibly somewhat limited support for joining a FaceTime group chat via a web browser from another computer, which doesn't have to be an Apple computer. So you can join it from Windows or Android or something like that, which might be limited to Chrome. It's a bit unclear at the moment, and Edge and anything else Chrome-based. So that's just an example of the group FaceTime view there. So what have they got here? So FaceTime, one of the major features they were touting is the thing called SharePlay. Now, the simplest way of thinking about SharePlay is if it makes most sense if you think of it in terms of a feature that should have been available nearly a year ago while everybody was stuck in lockdown in the pandemic, and it's less useful now, but it could still be handy for people who've got distributed families or friends or that sort of thing. The basic principle is that you're talking to somebody else over FaceTime, and you can then both start having a shared view of the same streaming media content. So an example would be you both want to watch the same movie, but you're not in the same place. So you're connected via FaceTime, you start watching a particular movie, and both of you can control the movie, and you can talk to each other while you're watching the movie. So it's basically having a sort of a live sitting beside each other, but not actually being beside each other, sharing the same experience. And the catch is, both of you have to be subscribed to the same service that offers the same material. So for example, if you're watching something on Apple TV Plus, you both have to have an Apple TV Plus account. If you're watching something on Netflix, assuming Netflix supports this feature, which isn't guaranteed, you both have to have Netflix accounts, that sort of thing. It works for, in effect, anything which can have a shared display that app developers want to support. So it's not just media. It could also be, for example, if you imagine something like a shared version of Monopoly or Scrabble or something like that, where you actually have the game board shared through FaceTime by everybody who's playing the game, and they can talk to each other with a separate FaceTime window while they're playing this game. So you can have board games, you could have interactive computer games, as long as the view is one that is the same view for everybody, not different views for different players. So I can think of all sorts of cute applications for this sort of stuff. One example is there's an app called Dice by Peacock, which if you play role-playing games, it has the ability to roll various different solids for the dice, like 6-sided and 8-sided and 12-sided and 20-sided dice. And you can choose what combinations of dice you want. It does a nice 3D rolling dice view and a little table and things. So you could have multiple people playing Dungeons and Dragons with the dice shared, so you can all see what the numbers say, that sort of thing. I can see all sorts of interesting uses for that. So it sounds quite cool. So watch together, listen together. It works with music, of course, as well. But again, you'd have to have the same streaming music service. So you can't do it using your own CD collection. You'd have to have Apple Music or Spotify or something like that. And everybody having an account. Sharing your screen via FaceTime is going to be quite a useful feature. Unfortunately, probably not quite at the point I can get rid of my rather expensive TeamViewer account if I'm helping somebody, but if somebody needs help with their computer, it will be possible to talk to them via FaceTime, and then they click a button which says, I'd like to share my screen, please. And the other person can then see what's on their screen, again, using the SharePlay feature. Of course, this only works if everybody's running a late enough operating system, which is the usual problem I run into. It's the mixtures of versions. Now, little point here. Can you see, if you can see my mouse is pointing, there's a little footnote there saying 2, number 2 on the end of that. Some of the features in the new operating systems are limited to certain models, and that's probably one of them. If I go and click on that 2, and it doesn't scroll correctly, that particular feature is only available on 2018 and later Mac models, which is the spatial audio one. So if I go back up there again. So spatial audio, if I can find it, it's so much stuff on this page. Here we go. In the specific case of FaceTime, if you're having a group FaceTime call and you've got several people on your screen and you're able to use the spatial audio feature and you're wearing compatible headphones or your speaker system is compatible, there's all sorts of caveats, then people's voices will appear to come from the direction of their picture on the screen, is the basic idea. So if you have 12 people in your group FaceTime call and somebody's over there and somebody else is over there, then you'll hear this person talking from that side and that person talking from the other side. That's it. So nice effect, but not really earth-shattering.
These, basically.
Yeah.
These all that.
Yeah, I think the speakers and the computers can do it as well. It's just the certain speaker combinations that won't work. So
Just that one question, Margaret, can you play music together as in a duet or is the timing out of whack?
it synchronizes everything quite carefully. So I don't know how it handles latency. It's only just become available in the latest developer beta, so nobody's really commented on how well it works yet. But it's supposed to be good enough that you can be watching the same movie and not have confusion about audio getting mixed up with what you can hear from other people, or blocks the audio or something. I don't know quite how that works yet, but haven't seen it in action. It's just a description from Apple so far, apart from the live demos. The microphone modes feature also looks quite useful. If you imagine you are trying to have a conversation with somebody in a loud environment, there might be background noise, it can actually cut out background noises, which are like, if there's I don't imagine it might not handle a jackhammer or something like that, but if there's traffic noise or something like that, it might be able to filter that out and your voice will be clearer. Yeah, I'm not sure about other people's voices. That's a problem. How can it tell? Unless it's actually a directional microphone, it can actually pick up the difference between what you're saying and what's coming in from the background, and might be able to pick it up then.
If you're wearing earpods, because the microphones are actually in both sides, so if it's picking noises up around, it might just limit them out.
Yeah, and also recent Mac models, particularly the laptops, have got multiple microphones and they're able to detect which direction the sound's coming from, so it can probably use that as well.
Might be a little bit different using iPhones, because iPhones usually have a couple of cameras. They have one at the bottom, one at the back.
Microphones,
so,
yeah. Okay, portrait mode. If you can see that picture on the right hand side there of the woman with the orange top on, you notice how the background is blurred. So that's similar to the portrait mode feature on iPhones, where you've got it automatically blurs the background for you. That feature requires an M1 Mac, because it actually uses the neural engine to learn. It's using the sort of the intelligence feature of the neural engine to learn the capabilities. So that one won't work on any Intel Mac. It only works on M1 Mac. But I don't know. I quite, the virtual backgrounds that Zoom does are quite cute, but I quite like a blurred background. So that would be a nice feature to have. So it's not as intrusive. So links, inviting people, I've mentioned those already. Okay. Any FaceTime questions? Otherwise, I can just move on to. Okay. So with messages, the major feature they were talking about was the shared with you one. Effectively, how this works is anything which is sent to you via a message in the way of media, so it might be audio, pictures, video, or something like that, Apple automatically pulls that out of the message and makes it available in the other application, which is normally managing that collection. So, for example, if somebody sends you a photo via messages and you don't do anything with it, just leave it there, later on you go and look at your photo library, you will find in your photo collection in the right place that particular photo. So it automatically inserts itself into your photos timeline in the right place. And you can see in your photo library that particular photo was shared with you and it isn't actually part of your library. So I think there's a way of hiding them, and you can also find them all easily with a shared with you category in like a smart folder kind of thing in Photos, or a smart album in that case. It's talking about a collage or stack of photos and messages. So you can see on the bottom right-hand side there that there's several photos you can click on to expand them, rather than being a whopping great huge long set of photos there, which is probably a better design. Now, Safari, this one is the most controversial one. I've been listening to podcasts for the first week so far after WWDC, and the general opinion so far is that nearly everybody hates this. So the hope is that Apple will back off it a bit, because it's quite annoying if you tend to use a lot of tabs. What they've done is they've collapsed the title bar of the Safari window so that rather than having a row of tabs and then below the title bar, it's all in one row. And the thing then in this picture which shows heapsandwood.com is actually the address field expanding out to occupy the entire tab. And the ones across the right, the Poquito Art and the Ad and Interior, are other tabs you've got open. If you click on one of these, one on the left will collapse and one on the right will expand. That means your location bar is no longer in a fixed place. It depends on which tab you're looking at. It'll be further and further to the right or further and further to the left. It's also rather hard to pick up and drag the Safari window because the areas you can actually click on which aren't part of something are very small. And most of the controls that you're used to having for doing things like refreshing the page and so forth are either hidden behind a ... thing or are not readily available. Like you can see, it's still got a back button and a few other things there, but I'm not sure I'm going to like this. We'll have to wait and see, but we're hoping Apple will give you an option of turning it off if you don't like it and go back to something resembling the old one. Also, the window changes color depending on the color of the website. So your title bar will, like if you're scrolling a blue thing up the top, top of your Safari window will be blue to match it. So if sometimes that's nice, sometimes it's really annoying if it sort of bleeds into the background. Yeah, so I'm not sure about that. Smart search field. So tab groups, it basically makes it easier to manage if you're in the habit of collecting like a set of related windows and tabs in Safari which are connected in some way and you want to be able to get back to them easily. You can save that as a tab group and restore it easily. So I tend to leave Safari windows open with dozens of tabs in some of them which are all connected together. So that was a feature I quite like to have, make it easier to manage them. It also syncs them between all your devices. So if you have an iPhone, an iPad and a Mac, you set up a set of tabs on your Mac and you create a tab group, you can easily get to them on your iPhone or your iPad or vice versa. Okay, any questions on so far? Not, I'll just move on to focus. So if you've ever used the do not disturb feature on any of your devices, this is basically a souped up version of it. How focus works is you can define multiple focus modes, for want of a better name, like work, home, watching movies, driving. You can name them anything you like. You can add new ones as you see fit. Each one of these things can have different custom rules for who is allowed to contact you, whether anybody else is allowed to see what your current status is, what notifications you receive. On an iPhone, which home screens are visible. So for example, you can put your phone into work mode and completely hide the page on your phone, which has all the games on it. So you aren't distracted by trying to play games while you're working. Or you can put it into home mode and it hides the screen that has all your work apps. So you're no longer bugged by email and things, notifications from work programs. So, and you can have them triggered automatically by location and various other features such as just easily hopping back and forth between them. And it also syncs them between all of your devices, which in my case, I'm thinking I'm going to want to make sure I can turn it off on some of my devices. I want them left alone. I don't want them fiddled with by Apple. They're doing something I want them to do. I don't want to be changing modes. So there is an example there showing some of the focus modes that this particular person set up. So standard do not disturb. They've created one called coding. For 1 hour until this evening, until tomorrow, we're always on in terms of the timing. So you can sort of say, I want to stay in this focus for a certain amount of time. And it tells you how long it is. And they've also got other ones called gaming, personal, work and sleep. And you can go and configure the preferences for it. So on the iPhone, I've seen it shown up as a screen, which sort of pops up on top of the whole screen. I haven't had a look at what the iPad does yet. I haven't had a decent play with that particular feature. Your status can be shown in messages. So like you'll see down the bottom left there, even has notifications silenced with focus. So that means that they're currently in a focus state where if somebody sends them a message, it's not going to pop up on their screen. And you can also have certain people able to break through even if you're in a sort of blocking out notifications mode. Okay, so that's more or less how that particular feature works. So the idea is it's supposed to be sort of trying to help you concentrate on whatever you're trying to do and be less distracted by your devices, which I'm sure that I would appreciate, because that means if somebody does text me while at work, I will ignore it rather than feeling the urge to answer it immediately, that sort of thing. So any questions on focus? No. Quick notes. So this is primarily an iPad and Mac feature. On the iPad, effectively what it means is you can swipe up from the bottom right-hand corner anywhere on the iPad and it will create a floating window in which you can write notes. Now that's in itself is quite a handy feature, but there's an extra feature associated with it. It remembers what you were doing on the iPad at the point you'd create the note. So for example, you are reading a web page, you create a quick note, it will remember what web page you were looking at and where you were on that web page. And if you then call up that quick note again later, it will take you back to the web page. So effectively, it lets you create notes in the context of whatever you're doing and call them up again later on. So if you go back to that web page, I think it gives you an easy way of accessing the note. Works the same on the Mac. It can be activated by, I think, from the control center on both the iPad and the Mac, and I haven't actually worked out what other ways there are of doing it on the Mac because I haven't had to play with this feature yet. But on the iPad, you can use your finger or an Apple Pencil to create the quick notes, and you can also have a keyboard shortcut and control center function or something like that. So I expect it'll be similar on the Mac. On the iPhone, you can look at your quick notes, but you can't create them. So it's really an iPad Mac feature with indirect access on the iPhone. So that's sort of what they look like. On the left-hand side there, it's just a little pop-up note that's associated with that particular block of text, I think in this case, on that web page. And on the right-hand side is another example. On the iPad, if you've ever had floating video, it's used a similar style of little window, so it floats on top of everything, and you can push it out of the way, and it leaves a little pop-out arrow on the side. You can get it back again quickly. So finding your quick notes, yeah, you can also get to them all in your Notes app. There's a whole category for quick notes you've created. It adds a thumbnail on the page to show you've got something apparently. It links to a quick note, and a thumbnail of your note will always show up where there when you go back. Yep, so that's an easy way to get back to it. What's this? Activity views and mentions. Oh, yes, that's right. If you have a shared note in the Notes app, you already had the ability to share a note with other people. So you could have a collaborative note you'll make, everybody's accumulating things. And you can now mention other people like you can with things like Twitter by saying @ in the person's name. So that actually draws their attention to something. So it notifies them if there's something you want them to do on that shared note. And it also gives you a record of what other people have done in the notes, so you can keep track of your history. So it makes it a more useful collaboration tool. You can also create tags in your notes, so you can use this hash and a tag name, and you can easily find all notes that mention a particular tag. So that's an easy way of just arbitrarily categorizing them. It's a bit like sort of keywords and photos, that sort of thing. Universal control. This is one also that only works on recent models. I think this one is recent Intel models and M1 Macs. Effectively, what this does is it lets you share your Mac keyboard and trackpad with a nearby Mac or iPad that is also linked to your iCloud account. So if you have an iPad sitting next to your computer and you want to just quickly do something on the iPad, you can swipe your mouse off the edge of the screen and it appears on the iPad and lets you control the iPad, as an example. So because the iPad's now got full keyboard and trackpad support and has had for about 6 months or so, I think I've lost track of when they added it. It was a year and a half ago, I think actually I was 13 and a half. It gives you the slightly different way of doing the mouse and trackpad and keyboard and so forth. So that works quite nicely. I haven't tried this particular feature yet, so I can't comment on how well it works. But if you have more than one device, at least with Macs, more than one Mac and more than one iPad, Mac and an iPad, it requires a Mac as the controlling unit. You can't start it from an iPad, you've got to start it from a Mac. AirPlay to Mac. So you could already AirPlay from a Mac to something else like an Apple TV. You can now use, for example, your iMac as an AirPlay destination. So if you have a reasonably big screen, you can be watching something on your phone, you can share it to your Mac screen and have it play there instead. So it's kind of like turns the Mac into an Apple TV, at least the sharing feature. So it's quite handy if you want to share something quickly, or you've got a group, a family iMac or something like that, which is in the room. Would also work with the laptop, but the bigger the screen, the better for that sort of thing generally. And the Mac works as an AirPlay speaker. That's something I hadn't actually mentioned before, but that makes sense. So if you want to play music through your Mac speakers controlled by your iPad or iPhone or something like that, that would be a way of looking at that. This one looks very cool, live text. So if Google already has a feature like this, does anyone remember the name of it? I can't remember what it's called now. Google, yeah, not translate specifically. It's just the finding, well, translate can do some of the stuff, but live text is really smart. Effectively what this means is any photo you've got on your computer or anything you can see through your camera, if there is text on it, your device will recognize the text and let you select it and copy it and search for it. So a photo you took 20 years ago, which happens to have a sign on it, you'll be able to find the text on that sign in Spotlight searches, for example. Unfortunately, this feature is one that requires an M1 Mac. So not yet for unless you get a new computer or you've already got one. So yes, but the examples they give there, the one on the left-hand side this is actually a photo of a sign on a building. They just selected the text and they can copy it. Yeah, there's something which Google's got where you can hold your camera up and it will recognize text in an image. But this goes way beyond what I tried the Google one briefly a while ago. The second example on the screen is showing an address on the sign, and it shows it on a map. So you can easily just look up from the text on describing the address. And it doesn't just text, it also recognizes things in photos. So for example, somebody took a photo of the Golden Gate Bridge, they pointed to it and live text recognized it was the Golden Gate Bridge and gave a description of it. Google Lens, that's the one. That was the one I was trying to think of. Yeah. And related to this feature, you may be aware that you already have the capability of searching your photo library for photos that contain certain well-recognized objects like dogs, cats, horses, mountains, forests, sky, sea, that sort of thing. Apparently they've extended it now so it supports breeds. So you can you can ask it what a particular dog breed is from just a photo of it. That sort of thing. I didn't get the full description because I heard that in passing in the keynote. So that's probably related to the one on the right there with the Golden Gate Bridge. I thought that's quite cute. Not quite. It will if it knows their face, but at least if it's like a dog breeds is the most obvious example, but butterflies, birds, don't know how far have they taken it. It's a question of what degree of information it's got. Like what plant is this in my garden? What weed is this? How far do you go? Which model of plane is that flying overhead? I mean, that could be a bit tricky. Yeah, it's basically a machine learning thing that Apple's done, and the information for it has been downloaded to the neural engine or is available on disk, whatever it needs to do. So that's quite cute. So shortcuts, which is something I would like to go into at some point later. So as a meeting topic eventually, because once it's available on the Mac, it's much more useful. If you've ever dabbled with automation on a Mac, the granddaddy of doing this thing is called AppleScript, which is basically a programming language that most people who use it classify as a write once, read never programming language, because it's impossible to understand it and it's very, very hard to use. But if you can get it working right, it works quite well. It's really, even programmers, and I'm a programmer, balk at using AppleScript for anything serious. I tend to use it myself sporadically, and it's usually by taking something I've already written, which I know works, and tweaking it until I get it to do what I want, rather than trying to write something from scratch. It's difficult. A few years ago, Apple introduced a nicer mechanism called Automator, which allows you to basically create a series of linked steps to do something. So for example, you can create an automated task, which you give it a folder and it gets all the files in that folder and does something to them, like changes into a different graphics file format or something like that and saves them somewhere else, that sort of thing. So it's a workflow sort of arrangement. Shortcuts takes that many steps further, and it's much more user-friendly than Automator. And the key point is that Shortcuts has already been available on the iPhone and iPad for several years, and now it's coming to the Mac as well. And for the most part, the actions you can do in Shortcuts are cross-platform, except if there's anything particular to a certain platform that they can do. So If somebody has already created a shortcut to do something that you want, you can load that shortcut on your iPhone, your iPad, or your Mac, wherever you want it, and you can then have a button on your home screen which does a particular thing, or a quick action which appears if you choose the share sheet. You can say, I want to do this thing which I've defined, or whatever it might be. So I would like to take this photo, crop it to a certain size, and email it to a particular person, all by clicking one button, that sort of thing. So it's fairly powerful. I haven't dabbled with it heavily yet. It's the sort of thing I want to spend a bit of time to get used to before I sort of talk about it in a meeting. But it's quite interesting. So the stop distractions. So it can also sort of control various parts of the operating system. So you can tie shortcuts into practically everything. For example, changing focus modes, changing your background color, switching between dark mode and light mode, changing your screen resolution, all sorts of stuff, setting up a projector. Like if you have a particular working environment you want to do for a particular task, it's quite good for doing that sort of, I need to do this, therefore I'll set it up in advance and click a single shortcut and make it go and do it, that sort of thing. They're shareable, they're quite flexible in terms of things you can do with them. There's an example in the middle of what a shortcut might look like. Receive any input from quick actions and what's on the screen, and if there isn't any, ask for it. Make a GIF from the input, going on 0.05 of a second loop for either auto size, show it as a GIF, and stop an output. If there's no output, do nothing. So it's a series of instructions, but it's quite easy to follow them, what they're actually doing. And it's also, even if you don't want to create them yourself, there are large and growing libraries of these things. So somebody may have already created something that does what you want. Now, some of the stuff in maps, first of all, they mention an interactive globe, which shows the entire world. That one requires an M1 Mac. Or a recent iPad or iPhone. The all-new in-city experience, which gives you even better looking representations of buildings and things, is limited to certain cities. And it's like they've got more and more data they're gathering in certain areas, and over time this will gradually expand. But Wellington will be way down the list and may not come in the next decade. So it's all sort of theoretical, really, unless you have to be traveling overseas.
Yeah, it took them a little while to get 3D maps, Wellington and certain parts of.
Okay, privacy stuff. There's quite a lot of this, but just to mention some of them quickly. A visible recording indicator on your screen if something is using your microphone. So, what's that? There's already one for the camera, the built-in light for the camera. So effectively, there's another one on the menu bar for your microphone. Mail privacy stuff. What's that? Email with more peace of mind. There's a more detailed page to read that. Oh, hides your IP address. That's right. So you may be familiar with the feature in Mail where you can turn off the load remote images. So rather than I don't know how many people are aware of this, but if you have a formatted email message with images in it that come from another web server, when you look at that message, that image gets loaded from the website, and the mere fact you've done that tells the website that you have read the message. So this is a mechanism that marketers tend to use and spammers to verify that this particular person exists because they read the email, and B, when you read the email, and see how many times you read the email. So it's giving away a lot of information about you. So what Apple is doing is adding this mail privacy protection feature, which effectively means that Apple reads the mail for you and then hides your IP address, so that the person who sent you the email doesn't actually know where you are, or when you open the message, or even if you open the message. So you can turn on load remote images and be quite confident that they're no longer going to be able to track you. So that's quite nice. I'm looking forward to that one. iCloud Plus has got some additional features in the same sort of line. This is if you are paying for an iCloud account already just to get extra storage, effectively a paid iCloud account becomes iCloud Plus. So it gets these extra features with no additional cost. So right now, everybody gets a 5 GB iCloud account for free. You can pay, I think it's $1.69 minimum a month to get the 50 gigabyte iCloud account. So that will now in future be an iCloud Plus account, but no extra charge. So the major feature that iCloud Plus gives you is private browser, what do they call it? Private relay for Safari. So what this does is it hides your web activity in Safari from the websites that you visit. They don't know where you are. But what it does is it actually forwards your web accesses through Apple, through another point, and then it goes to the website that it's supposed to get to. So the idea is that Apple knows where you are, they know your IP address, but they don't know what you're asking for because that information is encrypted. Apple then passes it on to a second station. That station is able to decrypt what you're asking for, but they don't know your IP address. So they don't know where you are. And then it gets passed on to the website. So the end result is the website gives you the information back via this direct route, and the website doesn't know where you are, so they can't log your IP address or identify you for tracking information and linking other things to you to find out who are. The classic example is, I've had yet another case of this in the last week or so. My partner's son bought a Roomba from, if you've ever encountered those, it's basically a robot vacuum cleaner. It's a round thing with a little docking station. He bought it from Amazon. Shortly after it arrived, I started seeing ads everywhere I went on web for similar products. I have never searched for this thing. The only way they know about this is that somebody else with my IP address has searched for this thing, and therefore everybody at this house is polluted with information about these particular ads. Another example that I came across in the past was I happened to be calling Tawa mowers to ask about a lawnmower, and then I happened to go into Bunnings and look at some weed eaters or something like that. I got back home again and had an ad for the exact weed eater I'd looked at Bunnings on my screen. How did they do that? Because I did a Google search for Tawa mowers, it started randomly showing me ads for lawnmower related products, just coincidentally was the one I looked at. It's quite freaky. So yet more privacy features will suit me quite nicely, thank you. The hide my email one is an extension of something Apple already offers, where you can sign in with Apple and have a randomized email address, so that the website you're signing into doesn't actually know your email address. This effectively lets you create them at will, and then you can use those email addresses as an alias for your real account. So they're something at iCloud.com, which is not obviously connected to you, and any email sent to that address is automatically forwarded to you. So it's a useful way of just basically hiding your email account from something you don't want to give it to. Again, that both these features require you paying for iCloud to get them, because there's extra costs involved for Apple. And so much more. So that's just the highlighted features that Apple's got. If you want to go and have a look at this page at your leisure, I've provided links to it in my article. They've got system-wide translation. Oh, the Apple ID stuff, that looked quite useful. How many times have people run into a problem where you've forgotten your Apple ID password? This lets you designate a trusted person to unlock your Apple ID account if you forget your password. So another family member, for example, if you've forgotten your password, you can ask your trusted contact to reset the password for you, or they can assist you with the process. The second part of it is the digital legacy program. If you die, you can designate, well, before you die, you can designate a trusted person who is able to basically take over your Apple ID account without having to jump through too many legal hoops before they can do so. Apple will basically have a pre-arrangement that this particular person is allowed to access your account, and they just need to apply to Apple to turn it on, presumably providing at least a death certificate or something to prove that you're dead and you're not just trying to steal their account. I haven't actually looked into it yet. But
really cool, because if that had been around now, we would have that same problem with Don Nickel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So I won't go into the full list because we'll be here all night, but I'll show you briefly just what it looks like. That's what that page takes you to, and there's basically pages and pages and pages and pages of features. So there's quite a lot of features there, but there are lots of little ones rather than big monstrous ones. So having shown you gone through the Monterey ones, I will just briefly show you the iPad ones. The major one, of course, is the widgets. If you look at that picture in the middle there, you can see the iPad home screen now has widgets along the top. And also there's an app library, which you can see the icon of on the right-hand side of the dock. So you can easily get to a list of all your apps, take them off your home screen if you don't want them. And you can put widgets anywhere like on the home screen rather than just being in one place. So if you've already used those features on the iPhone, it's quite similar on the iPad. Unfortunately, the Mac doesn't get all the widget niceness yet. That may come later, but at the moment, widgets on the Mac are still limited to the notification pop out on the right-hand side, which is a nuisance. The multitasking stuff is quite nice. If you look here, if you see where I'm pointing at the top there is a 3-dot thing which appears in the top center of apps on the iPad. And you can use that as a thumb to drag the application around, or you can click on it and it pops up a little control, which lets you easily switch into slide over or split view mode. If you've ever dabbled with those modes before, I've used them a few times, and every single time I try to use them, I get very frustrated because the gestures are difficult. You have to sort of drag things to the right place and work out what you're supposed to do now to get rid of it. And having these little controls is going to be much easier, because effectively what you do is you click on, you can see it, you can click on it, and when you click on it, it gives you, where's the picture? I'm looking for the picture of it. There. That picture there with the Crane and Butcher matches. It gives you a full screen, a right-hand side slide over, or a split view, or a right-hand side slide over. You can just click on the mode you want. So you can push this app across the right. And an additional part of it is if you want to put an app on half the screen and get another one to load alongside it, rather than giving you a scrolling list of apps, it now gives you your home screen. You pick the app you want and it puts it there. So it's much easier to actually operate this thing. There's also a shelf feature which lets you see all of your, I don't know where they put that, app switcher, keyboard shortcuts. They haven't shown it, but there's a shelf thing which lets you, oh, that might be it there. Yeah, there it is. So it shows you all the open documents and windows you've got for your current app. So when you switch into an app, you can easily jump to the right one that you want, rather than the previous method, which required you to remember which combination, which Safari it was you were working with that particular web page. It was horrible before. This is going to be a lot easier, I hope. The app switch is nicer. Yeah, that's minor. That screenshot there shows the new keyboard shortcuts thing. If you hold down a modifier key on the keyboard, the command key, for example, it gives you a little menu-like system which easily lets you browse through all the available keyboard shortcuts. And if you have got a keyboard on your iPad, either a Apple Magic keyboard or one of the older flip-out ones, the globe key, which was previously used to switch languages, is also a modifier key with the new operating system, and that lets you use global keyboard shortcuts. So effectively, you've now got Command and Globe, both of which can have their own keyboard shortcuts on them. And so Globe is intended for global operating system things, and Command is for the application to use. So you will have fewer conflicts and more keyboard shortcuts available, and you can assign shortcuts to them as well. So you can create your own keyboard shortcuts using the Shortcuts app, and say a particular key combination that you want to use does some particular thing on your iPad, whatever you might want to do. So there's some options there. I won't go into widgets and app library because that's very similar to the iPhone. Quick notes I've already talked about. I've already explained the thumbnails thing. FaceTime I've already talked about. That's basically the same. That's the same. That's the same. That's the same. This is the point. But yeah, messages and emoji stuff. There's some extra emoji which isn't on the Mac, but that's well, yeah, being able to have outfits and hairstyles and all those sorts of things. Focus is very similar. We talked about that. Notifications, redesigned. The Mac has missed out on the notification improvements to some extent because it's all still stuck on the right-hand side, but they've improved the way in which notifications are displayed, and they've got a better summary of them. Safari has the same redesign as the Mac pretty much on the iPad. Tab groups the same. Search the web using just your voice. Oh, yes. Adding support for extensions in Safari, which will possibly make them more popular than they are at the moment. Map stuff is the same. Live text is the same. Visual lookup I described briefly, so that's recognizing things in photos. fancy searching, so photos of San Francisco recognize objects that are known to be in San Francisco, so it finds the Golden Gate Bridge, that sort of thing. That's programming feature really, but interesting note there, Swift Playgrounds is something that Apple already had, lets you basically do simple programming on an iPad. With the new OS version, it will now be possible to use Swift Playgrounds to write an app from scratch on an iPad, save it as a fully working application, and if you have an Apple developer account, upload it to Apple and sell it via the App Store without anything other than an iPad. So it's the first time that the iPad is able to be a development platform for itself rather than needing a Mac to do the grunt work. So that sort of promotes it one step up the chain in terms of being a fully functional standalone computer. Universal control, I mentioned that already, that requires the Mac. Privacy features are basically the same. One on the right-hand side is interesting. If you have a recent enough iPad or iPhone, it's able to use the neural engine to understand what it is that you said without having to send all your text off to Apple and get them their servers to decode it for you. So that significantly improves the privacy of using Siri, and also means it's a lot faster. And it also means you don't need an internet connection in some cases. So for example, if you want to set a timer on your iPhone with Siri, you have to do that at the moment. It has to send the request off to Apple. Apple has to work out what it is that you want. It comes back again. And the commentary I've been hearing about that recently is you have to work out how many more seconds you want to not account in your timer, because you have to allow for the amount of time it's going to take the request to get there and back again. If you want a 1 minute timer, it might actually be a minute and a quarter or a minute and a half or something. So this will be a lot faster, but you do need a recent device. Like I think it's an iPad Air 3, iPad Mini 5, 8th generation iPad, recent iPad Pros. So it's an A12 processor, basically, for that feature. iCloud Plus I've already talked about, and more. Yeah, so I won't go into the more stuff. And by the time you get to iOS 15, I think I've talked about everything. New experiences, FaceTime, SharePlay, yeah, messages and emoji stuff, which I didn't really look into much. Focus modes. There's what the focus screen looks like on the iPhone, so that you pick which focus you're in. Notifications, I mentioned. Maps. Yeah, Safari on the iPhone is a bit different because they've basically moved the address bar down to the bottom, so it's easy to get to from, you don't have to reach all the way up to the top of the iPhone screen. It's right at the bottom. It's going to take a bit of getting used to, but it's probably actually an improvement. Plus it supports tab groups and all sorts of things, so the tabbing is all different as well. So I haven't looked into that much yet. Wallet, yeah, some of the stuff will require the right hardware, but there are some iPhone specific things to do with the wallet for smart home stuff and keys and those sorts of things. Live text we talked about. Visual lookup we talked about. Spotlight, searches for things in photos, that sort of stuff. Health. Yeah, they've added, that's right, health on the phone, which doesn't really apply to anything else, has added the ability to let you share certain health information with designated people and with doctors once their systems are able to handle it. So it's like limited US only at the moment. So in the future, but the family one might be quite handy. So for example, you might have a child and a parent where the parent has a heart condition. The child can actually have access to the parent's heartbeat information and they can see what the heart rate is looking like, that sort of thing. I don't know whether other applications there might be for that, but I'm sure there are lots of possibly useful cases there. And you have full control over what you're sharing and who you're sharing it with. Talked about them already. So they're all the same. And yeah, okay, so we've reached the end there. Okay. I'm going to close that screen for now. If I can remember how to. There we go. Stop share. Go back to this one. And ask if anybody has any questions at this point on the feature set. I don't see any hands up. Okay. Does anybody have any questions on the compatibility side of things and sort of future planning? We've already had one preliminary question on that effectively in the Q&A session. So as I noted in my article, if you have a device which is already able to run iOS 14 or iPadOS 14, so iPhones, iPads, they will also be able to upgrade to iOS 15. There's no compatibility changes on the iPhone or iPad. On the Mac, Apple is raising the bar about a year in terms of what models are able to run Monterey compared to running Big Sur. So the baseline is effectively, if you have a 2016 Mac or later, it will run Monterey. If you have a 2015 Mac, late 2015 Macs are okay, but early to mid ones depend on which model you've got. And like the iMac seems to be suffering the worst in terms of support. It's sort of every time they've done a cutoff recently, the iMac's been worst affected than the others. If you have a 12-inch MacBook, the first model of that is not supported by Monterey, probably because it's just too old and too slow compared to the later ones. But the 2015 MacBook Air and MacBook Pro are still supported. So that covers a fair number of basically the last generation of pre-USB-C models are supported for the laptops. But my very trusty 2013 MacBook Pro is not going to be able to run Monterey. So I'll have to use my newer one or a future one if I want to do that. So anybody have any compatibility related questions or more widely general questions on Mac purchases or planning thereof, or iPhone, iPad stuff for that matter?
Margaret's got any minute.
Yes, Margaret, do you need to unmute before I can hear you?
Is there a beta version out, and has anybody commented on the Mail app? Because that was singularly not present in the presentation.
No, I have stopped talking about it because the problem has not gone away. And it's just repeating myself every time I mention it.
Sorry, David.
The blog that I'm following, where the guy has been tracking this problem, every time a new operating system comes out, somebody asks, does anybody know if the problem is still there? Oh, no, it seems to have gone away. And then somebody pipes up and says, nope, I'm still being affected by it. So as far as we can tell, it's still there in the current version of Big Sur, and no sign that Apple has fixed it. Don't know yet whether the as yet unreleased Big Sur 11.5 update has fixed it. It might be out this week even, there's a possibility. And don't know yet whether Monterey is affected. My current attitude on Mail is that I'm either going to keep my fingers crossed that I never get struck by this bug, or stop using Apple Mail for anything important. And I haven't quite made my mind up yet about which of those I'm going to go towards.
It's a bit like COVID. A lot of people say it's no problem, and some have their email completely stuffed.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the descriptions that people have been making of the problem have directly opposite descriptions of what situations the problem will occur. And some people say it happens one way, some people say it happens the other way, and I'm now no longer sure which is correct. So it's like originally I thought if you move a message from a pop account to on my Mac folder, it was all right. On my Mac folders were all right. And you could move messages within an IMAP account, but not between them. But somebody said the exact opposite. So I don't know what the rule is now, where the problem might occur. And it may be that the same problems occurring in different circumstances of different people. So I cannot believe that Apple has been almost 2 years that this bug has been there now, and they haven't fixed it or haven't been able to find it allegedly. So yeah. I'm now getting to the point where I need to be running a later operating system than Mojave, because I'm getting an increasing set of applications that simply don't work in Mojave. They need something newer. And I'm now getting some that don't work in Catalina either. And I can't upgrade my newer MacBook Pro from Catalina because that will break my virtual machines because they don't work properly in Big Sur. So tearing hair out. I'm going to be the 3 Mac. I'm going to have to use 3 different Macs depending on what I'm doing. It's getting a bit ridiculous.
Sorry,
So-
sorry to bring it up, David, but I just noticed that it wasn't mentioned.
So I had been dabbling with what's it called? I've forgotten the name of the app now.
Don't worry, Margaret, I'm in the same situation. I'm reluctant to upgrade to because of that same bloody bug.
Postbox. Was that Postbox? As an application I was trying out, and I've run it briefly alongside Apple Mail, so I've sort of had both of them running at the same time and using one to see what the other one looks like and that sort of thing. So it's a reasonable option. There are probably about 5 or 6 different email programs you could use depending on exactly what sort of email account you've got. Some of them are limited. For example, a fair number of email clients don't support POP accounts. They only support IMAP. And if you want to work with a Gmail account, you need one that's compatible with Gmail's complicated security mechanism, which limits the options. So I haven't investigated fully yet. I'm just sort of gradually building up as time permits, which doesn't usually. So that's unfortunately down my radar at the moment.
It would be interesting to know whether the people affected tend to be using a particular client for email. But anyway, I won't continue with this, David. That's all right. Nothing more happened.
I think you mean server for email, and that's completely random. It's affect every type of email account that everybody's mentioned. So and it's impossible to identify the circumstances in which it happens. So yeah, I don't know, unfortunately.
Carry on. I'll mute myself.
Okay. Other questions from anybody? Or comments? If not, we might be able to have an early night. Sorry? Okay. Now, have I got, what's it on here? My co-host. Find the right page. Just as a matter of curiosity. It's my Zoom gone. Share the screen. Here is a spreadsheet I created earlier, which I thought might be of interest. I went and worked out which Mac models were dropped by each operating system version to see if I can start formally clarification on the patterns. So the colors that I've used here are directly related to which OS version dropped those particular models. So what's going on there? That each column in the spreadsheet is a general class of Mac models. So for example, under the MacBook Pro category, I've split it up into 13-inch models, 13-inch models with Retina displays, 13-inch models with 2 Thunderbolt 3 ports, 13-inch models with 4 Thunderbolt 3 ports, 13-inch models with the M1 processor, 15-inch models, 15-inch models with Retina display, etc. So each sort of class of MacBook Pro sort of generally advancing in towards the future as you go towards the right, roughly. So the colouring there, you can see the timelines are reasonably consistent. The dark blue ones are the models that couldn't upgrade beyond El Capitan. The mid-range blue ones are the ones that couldn't upgrade beyond High Sierra. The pale blue ones couldn't upgrade beyond Catalina to Big Sur, and the orange ones can't upgrade from Big Sur to Monterey. So it gets a little bit peculiar because of odd cases like the 13-inch MacBook Pro, which the original model of that, Apple sold that for a shockingly long time. The last model of that, sorry. So they were selling it from mid-2012 all the way up to late 2016. So that particular model sort of pushes an outlier a bit. And that is one of the models that is the worst case in terms of the shortest time that it got dropped from future OS versions if you bought one late in its life cycle. So it was only 4 years after they discontinued that model that it couldn't run the latest operating systems. That's about the worst case, but it was a very long-lived model. If you counted it from the beginning, it was 8 years from the beginning of that model, so only 4 years from the end of it. So it's a bit random. And if I go to the right, then that adds the iMacs to the equation and the Mac Pro. So the Mac Pro, I used green for the 2010 and 12 models because they got special rules. They had a special dispensation to run Mojave and were then dropped by Catalina, depending on exactly what graphics card they had. So those ones are sort of a special case. Everything else, it was Sierra, Mojave, Big Sur, and now Monterey, which have dropped models. So the white ones at the bottom are the current models, which are still supported by Monterey. So you can see the timeline varies a little bit. But I was trying to work out if there was a specific rule, and the best one I've come up with is everything from late 2015 onwards that was introduced at that point is supported by Monterey, with a couple of additional older models, the late 2014 Mac Mini and the late 2013 Mac Pro. And I think the only reasons those models were supported is because you can see there the Mac Mini, that's starting there, going right down to there. So that point there was mid-2018. That was too close to now for Apple to justify dropping it. It's only 3 years ago that model was discontinued. Well, it will be 3 years as of when Monterey is released. And the Mac Pro is even worse. The 2019 Mac Pro didn't come out until late 2019, I mean December, and therefore the 2013 one, on the basis that Apple seems to be wanting to support things for 4 years after they were discontinued, the 2014 Mac Mini might be dropped next year, and the 2013 Mac Pro might be dropped in 2 years. So they've got a way to go yet. But you can see the sizes of the jumps generally are reasonably small. Apple's sort of going 1 to 1.5 years each time they drop versions, and they're sort of maintaining a 6-year buffer as well. So on the introduction side, so the effect is that if you buy a Mac model, or if you bought your Mac when it was a reasonably new model, it's still true that you should be reasonably confident you can get 6 years of software updates for it, plus security updates after that. And if you bought it late in its life cycle, you can probably still be sure you're going to get about 4 years of software updates. So as a reasonable minimum. And in fact, with that one exception of the 13-inch MacBook Pro, I think the recent minimum has been 5 years of support for old models, not just 4. So it's unusual for it to be as low as 4. For comparison, when the PowerPC to Intel transition occurred, there were certain models that only got 3 years of software updates after they were discontinued. So Apple's doing better this time around by at least a year and usually 2 years compared to what it was back in 2000 and whichever year it was, 2006, when they did the PowerPC to Intel transition. So that's a good sign. While I've got my spreadsheets here, are there any other ones of interest? That was me keeping track of all of the OS releases since the last major version. So I've just been noting what dates they were all released on, so I can keep track of where we were and what was out at a particular time, rather than go and hunt online for them. Now, yes, this is my how long are all Mac models supported for graphs, which I've done in the past, sort of keeping track of it. So you can sort of see they tend to hover around about the 7 to 8 year mark, including getting up to 9 to 10 years in some cases for security updates. Sort of data I accumulate over time, which is quite handy, referring to it later. And this one's quite good as well. Every time new models come out, I use this one to keep track of what models were discontinued, what models have been introduced, feature comparisons, options included, so I can remember what they were after Apple replaces them, so I know what they used to be and I can see what they are now. So trying to keep track of all the stuff with only Apple's website to refer to is very tricky. So yes, it's a lot of information I try to keep track of. So right. Any last requests? Otherwise, we might have an early night tonight. Nope. Okay, I think I will say thank you, everybody, for attending, and we shall call it an evening.
I shall stop recording.
Yep, thank you, Graham.
So.